sometimes I watch these shows or listen to these podcasts where these guys come on and they're all loud and annoying, "Good morning."
Oh, isn't that the worst?
Oh my gosh, I hate when
man.
people do that.
Oh, it's so annoying.
It's like it's 7:00 in the morning, 7:30. I'm trying to just barely
just
wake
ease
up.
into the day. Come
Yeah,
on,
like
man.
who's coming
Just
with that loud?
I know we need to be like a comfortable slipper. You know,
yes.
I mean, not a. I don't know. What would this be? A boot that comes in and just kicks your butt? That's just
I like it.
Hey guys.
All right, so now for every show, we're gonna try a new shoe style.
I know.
Here's the slipper approach.
yeah,
the
yeah.
stiletto heel approach.
What is that? Loud and screechy? What is this? Welcome to the morning show.
I'm Reed Garcia.
This is Ryder Richards.
And you know what? Let's just go a little crazy today and just start off with the intro.
Helpful for life.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Welcome to the morning show.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome back. It is Thirsty Thursday.
Thirsty Thursday, November 4th, 2021. And I'm glad you mentioned Thirsty Thursday. Let me check in with our assistant real quick. Why don't you just, I don't know, tell people how you're doing or something.
Okay. This is actually the worst part of the show, are these odd soliloquies where I just have to ramble for a little while. Soliloquy is an interesting word. I'm not sure I even know what it means. Innuendo, that's another good word. Once again, not sure what that word means. Wait, I've got somebody checking on this. Should I throw out any more bizarre words? Bombastic is a favorite of mine. I also like that word.
So I heard innuendo, bombastic. What else is on there?
Soliloquy.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
nice.
yeah. It's close to a eulogy, but that's maybe the direction where this show is going.
I was going to say, yeah, if we let you do more soliloquies, that's probably where it's headed for sure. But it did make me think of one thing where the words that you never really say loud, but you read them, and then the first time you heard
yesterday?
them. I know, I was trying to...
Reprise?
Yeah.
It was like, is that how you say that?
Yeah, and is that only a musical term, or is it used elsewhere? So the way I understand a reprise or a reprise or a reprise, a reprise is you're playing the song and then you play this little bit, and then later on in the song you play something similar to that bit. It's kind of like a callback, but it's slightly different. That's what I think of reprises. But
yeah, no, I think you talked about it in terms of a reprise is in a break or a pause from something, and so
that's a reprieve.
A reprieve. Oh, see, I'm just getting them all bound up together.
We're working up on
Maybe
our vocabulary here.
What was the one that I always screwed up in college because it was a word that I had read so much in architecture and had never heard out loud, and I said something like facade.
Oh, instead of facade. To be fair, it's got that little funky C-looking thing with the. What is that?
Makes sense to me.
What is that? You know what I mean? Oh, so yesterday, what did we talk about yesterday, Ryder?
Oh, we had on Alexandra Mannerings, and she, of course, is a brilliant sort of data person that actually helps out nonprofits through her company Mirakinos. And so we talked a little
Data
bit.
rock star, I think is a good title.
Yeah, Data Rock. Star. Yeah. No, she's always pleasant to talk to and sort of walks us through, I think we were talking about risk and maybe understanding of risk, like what it means to have a 30% chance of something versus just 100% or a 0%. And how I think even behavioral economics, she started talking about confirmation bias and things like that, and how these kind of behavioral studies show us that people aren't very good without a kind of a yes/no. They think there's a 90% chance of something, and then it doesn't happen, and then they're either they're outraged or
right.
This didn't work, because if it didn't happen to you, which is an obvious yes or no, then they don't understand how percentages work.
Yeah. Well, first off, I want to point out that, she is a rock star. And as soon as she came on, all of the positive comments about our show started flowing in.
I know,
I've had 5 different people say wow, that Alexandra girl is really good. I'm like, we're on episode 28. You know, this is the first thing you ever told to me. You know, like,
what about us? Why did you?
Yeah, come on, tell me something. Come on.
I just need a little love.
Yeah, please. So we have two routes forward. We either are going to have her on a lot, or we're never going to have her on again.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we should have her on a lot more.
Yeah,
I
probably
think.
so.
Yeah, no, she's brilliant, and yeah, one of the things that was fun talking with her about that was being able to sort of figure out that these percentages that we think about, like, we're just not really built for statistics,
Right?
And we don't really understand things like exponential growth.
And by we mean literally like the way your brain is wired and the way humans understand things.
Yeah, and which is really fascinating. And so then we talked about, you know, she was saying that one of the ways she recognizes when something is going like haywire is when she feels confirmation, when she feels positive about something, is the minute she questions it and says, I need to do research on this.
Right.
The minute you feel comfortable is the minute you should be questioning. And I was just like, oh, that is such a good rule of thumb.
Yeah. And, you know, I didn't think about it until right now, but honestly, in some ways, that kind of ties in with religion or spirituality as well. Because it's like, hey, if you feel very comfortable and sure, and it's like, and you haven't, especially if you haven't done the work, right? It's just like, oh, this is kind of where life led me or what I fell into. It's like, well, maybe that's when it's a good time to like, oh, okay, so I'm comfortable. These are the things that I believe now, and I feel in a safe, comfortable spot. So maybe I'll start researching a little bit more and figuring out, hey, what are the other things out there, and what do other people believe? And if for nothing else, just to understand what other people think and feel, and so you can relate and understand.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think religion is one of them that it has like a built-in defense mechanism that is, you know, don't question outside of this, because that's what leads you down these negative paths that will question your faith. So there is kind of a rule inside of a lot of religions that is to not look around.
Right.
And so that's one of those kind of confirmation bias things as well. It's also a sunk cost fallacy, because once you have gone far enough down the journey, then people start going, well, I'm already here. I've already spent all this energy getting here. This is just who I am. And then they lock it down. And that's that confirmation that probably needs to start being questioned at some point. And you don't have to question everything all the time. It's just
don't. I don't recommend it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard and scary. And but you know, sometimes every now and then you'll get some dissonance, some waves. And for me, that usually tells me that I probably need to be checking on something.
Yeah. And so I guess one little clarification I'll add is you don't want to be questioning everything all the time, right? Because that you can literally be mentally unsettling. But so, yeah, it's kind of good to maybe look at one area at a time, right? And it's like, okay, well, now I'm looking at this religion aspect. Maybe now I'm really rethinking my relationship with food, which, by the way, if you're rethinking your relationship with food, one of the great things that you can do is kickstart your kitchen. You know, it's an online course brought to you by us, Helpful for Life, which I'm wearing this lovely Helpful for Life sweatshirt here, given to me as a gift by Mama G, my mother, and
Mama G.
Yeah, that's her nickname. She loves it. Hopefully,
she's just been saying she loves it. She's been humoring you for years. And
years
she's like,
and years.
Please let him stop.
Yeah, exactly. But Mama G, actually, I mean, she's the one who largely taught me how to cook and also exposed me to the larger world of cooking. And you know, when I was growing up, the Food Network was one that was on all the time, and she's a lovely Southern lady with lots of lovely Southern hosting qualities. And man, can she throw a party, and she can have all the lovely dishes. I don't know why I keep saying lovely. But for example, one thing she did for a couple years actually was
like they look really good, but they're not tasty.
Yeah.
So we just keep calling them lovely.
Oh, those are lovely. Like one of those terms where you're like, oh yeah, that's interesting.
Oh, bless your heart, those are lovely.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great Southern phrase. Bless your heart. It's like a condescending way of saying like, nah, sorry. Or to reference a comedy that nobody else here has seen yet. Girl, this was. I won't explain that one.
Okay. But that was that stiletto coming in.
Exactly. But anyway, so my mom taught me how to cook, and then watching the Food Network and things like that, and being inspired by various shows there. And Alton Brown he had a show called Good Eats, which had the science part of food, and so I really liked that one. But all that stuff was a big inspiration and a good base of knowledge to use as I created Kickstart Your Kitchen. And so you can go to kickstartyourkitchen.com. And you can revolutionize your cooking game in as little as a weekend. So it's an online course that you do at your own pace. You have it for life. And we have some exciting announcements coming up with that in the next few weeks. So right now you can buy the course by itself. But in the next few weeks, we're actually going to be launching a cohort model, which is where, hey, let's have a whole bunch of people go through it at the same time. And we're going to take a narrower lens on cooking. And exactly what that is still to be announced. So keep your ears peeled. But that is one other thing I wanted to just point out, a couple clarifications on the recap from yesterday. So we talked about statistics. We talked about some health statistics, and we actually went through an example of a mother having her kid diagnosed with Down syndrome. And so we talked about that and how the various percentages affected. And one of the important things that Alexandra really does a great job of bringing to the team is she highlights how, hey, whether you're looking at statistics, especially if it's something close to you or involving you personally or something health-wise or someone you care about, the first step is to feel it and recognize that, hey, you can feel those emotions. You may not be in the best place to make a rational decision right when you're feeling those things. So that's okay. Recognize that. Take the time to feel it, and then take the time to analyze the data, figure out, and look at, okay, how is this going to change the actions that I'm taking? And so that was kind of a really good model that she brought up.
Because, of course, a lot of people feel and act almost as one.
Right.
And this idea of just slowing down, letting the feelings pass through you, dealing with those, and then actually processing something external to actually help you make decisions, talking to friends, things like that, very important steps and things that I've just been learning about recently. It's funny that I think now about some of the most successful and fun times I've had, and some of the best decisions I've made have all been made in sort of a group context rather than me on my own. So I think that's kind of an interesting thing to just keep in the back of your head, is just like, give these things and if we want to stay biblical or something, there is this idea of everything has its season. And so taking times to do certain things, right? Take your time to feel, to grieve, to be upset, and then, sort of, I don't know, get back on the saddle, start looking around, talking to people, analyzing some data. So anyway, those are all good things. It's funny because I don't really do the religious thing anymore, but I still have all the foundational knowledge from the Bible stuffed away. So it's a nice resource on occasion.
Quick, John 3:16.
Oh, do not unto others beeth with thou heart.
Yeah.
All I know is
that was the King James translation. I wanted the New International Version.
No, I just I can't even remember what it is anymore because it's just, all I can think about is football games when I see it now.
Yeah. That's great. A nice little association. It's like, for God so loved the world. Go Bears!
Yeah, I know. This is like, it's like, I don't understand anymore.
And in the beginning, there was light and touchdowns!
Yes. How did these all get synced up? It's pretty amazing.
Yes, and you should love thy brother. Go to your room! Weird how it all just kind of falls on top of one another like that.
Yeah, but it's also something where when you see it often enough, it just sort of disappears. You're like, oh, that's just some Bible verse. I'm sure it's profound.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, one thing I wanted to define, because we've used it a couple times now. I don't think we ever fully defined it. Sunk cost. So a sunk cost is when you're doing something and you get so invested in the thing that you're almost blind to the fact that maybe it's not the best thing you should be doing, but you've put all this time, energy, and maybe money into it, that you're like, it's a sunk cost at this point. And you just basically accept, like, I'm going to do that thing regardless of whether or not I should. A great example of this is entrepreneurship. I mean, awkward. Oh, man.
No, but it's a very real thing. And I just heard, I think, Naval Ravikant talking about it and just saying that one of the things that really great, like, artists, for instance, do is they'll go to the top of the mountain and they'll get most of the way up and just be like, you know what? I'm going back down to the bottom. I'm going to relearn something else, right? It's very hard to do. Most people start on their way up and they're just like, I'm halfway up the mountain. I just have to keep going.
Yeah.
And there's something about, when do you look around and just be like, this trail going up the mountain is never going to work.
Yeah, or maybe like it'll get me to this peak, but I would need to get to that higher peak or want to get to that higher peak, which I can't do on this trail. Another example that popped into mind was Tiger Woods. In the middle of his career, he famously basically relearned his strokes, and he was already one of the better ones, if not the best in the game at that point. And fun fact for you, his coach while he was doing that was someone named Hank Haney, who lives here in McKinney and actually has a golf course here and does all sorts of training and stuff. So that's kind of fun little tidbit.
Mr. Haney?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. He's got an interesting name.
He does. Actually, he's cousin to the underwear manufacturer, Hanes. But he's like, I got to get a little different. So he changed that one letter. Yeah. Haney, Heine, it's like he didn't get that far away.
Mr. Haney, the Christmas poo. Right.
Yeah, Mr. Haney. Yeah, that's pretty good. South Park reference for you guys. So today, we're going to talk about two interesting things that are pretty related. And the first one is an audience message.
What?
Yes.
We have audience?
We have somebody who wrote in. They're like, wow.
This is like the mailbag, the
tell me
grab
things.
bag.
Yes. And we actually, so this is the first of what will be very many of our new segment. What was the name of our segment?
Oh, ours, Gar.
Gar. So welcome to Gar. The fun Gar art will be coming soon.
Yeah. We is go ask, writer, and read.
Yes.
GARR.
Yes.
Gar.
So we want you guys to be asking us all sorts of things. So make sure you Gar, because the more you ask us, the more we'll answer your questions. Which guess what? They'll help you, but somebody else has that question too, probably.
Oh, yeah.
And
it's probably us.
Yes. So when we answer it for ourselves, we will also answer it for you. So that'll be the first thing we talk about is one of those audience questions, which has to do with headphones and noise isolation, noise cancellation, things like that. And then later on in the show, we're going to talk about how Ryder and I go through our purchasing decisions. What kind of research do we do? What kind of factors do we consider? How do we know when to buy the higher end thing versus the lower end things? Various things like that. And I'm very curious to hear what you have to say on this because we have not talked about this before, and it's always interesting to see what that process looks like.
Yeah, no, we really haven't talked about it. So it'll be fun to see where we differ and where we agree on this kind of stuff. Because once again, there is a sunk cost fallacy.
Yes.
Yeah, there is.
Yes, there is. And research is one of those things.
Yeah. Oh man.
Probably both of us have gone a little too far on. That is true. So let me pull up his question, and then we will dive right into it. And here.
In the meantime, another word I like is fallacious.
Fallacious, as in fellatio.
Well, I like that too, but
what does fallacious mean? I knew it didn't do with fellatio.
Fallacy.
But okay,
it's just a different version of the word fallacy.
And then so a fallacy.
So a fallacious concept.
Yeah. So what is a fallacy? Define that.
A fallacy would be like falsity. It's something in that range, right? It's something that you would.
Does it presume that people think it's true, but it's like no, it's not actually?
Yes, that's a better way to talk about it. So, yeah.
So like a sunk cost fallacy.
It is.
Right?
It is. It's a sunk cost. It's something that you probably believe that isn't true, and so when something is
like Bush did 9/11. I mean, wait,
yeah,
that is
right.
true.
Wait,
is
no?
it?
Yeah. So a lot of conspiracies, but there's also just a lot of simple things that might be a fallacy. I don't know. I'm trying to think. It's weird because it's hard to think in negatives. It's hard to think of something that you can disprove. But it might be something like, I don't know, brushing your teeth with baking powder turns them black or turns them white or something. And that might just be like some sort of commonsensical truth that's actually fallacious. It's not true, but it's something that's been passed down for generations.
Gotcha.
So there's a lot of sort of common sense wisdom that you find isn't actually accurate. And that could be fallacious. It could also, I don't know what it is when politicians do it. I think that's something different. Whenever they say one thing and mean another, I think that's beyond fallacious. It's something along the lines of manipulative.
Well, what you're doing now is you're going down a rabbit hole, and similar to going down is the word fellatio. That is a slang for oral sex.
Yeah.
But back to the audience question.
Right. Sorry about that.
No, we're good. I think I can see the comments here. Everyone says, "Writer, please tell us more words that you like." Actually, while we're talking about words, Danielle gives her definition of a reprise or reprise or however you want to say it. She says a portion of a song is played earlier in the show or played again later on, usually with some of the lyrics changed to align with the more climactic part of the plot. That sounds pretty good to me. And then she says that she wants to know, well, fellatio is fallacious in many marriages. So that's kind of fitting. Good point. So welcome to our new segment.
Go ask Ryder and Reed.
Go ask Ryder and Reed. Or sorry, we should be less. Go ask Ryder and Reed.
Yes.
Welcome to Go Ask Ryder and Reed. Our first question. Let me just turn on my radio announcer as I read this voice. Our first question we have from Troy in Omaha, Nebraska. He says, do you have any recommendations for noise-canceling headphones? I'm trying to reduce the amount of time I use my AirPods. I love them, but I think I now have tinnitus from wearing them so much, and specifically jacking up the volume while I'm mowing. I think around the ear headphones which also can be called over-the-ear headphones, by the way, will help me reduce my usage of the AirPods and reduce noise in my co-working space. Yeah, so
excellent points.
Yeah, so that's a very good point. So one thing I want to point out here is the specific headphone you use. It can change how well the sound goes from the headphone into your ear. So there's that to consider. But the main thing is not as much as what is the volume that you're blasting into your ears.
Yeah, there's several things there where what we're talking about over time is sustained damage through loud volume, right? And the
loud noises.
Yes. Anchorman reference.
Yes, two days in a row. I'm gonna see how long I can keep this train going.
Keep it running. Yeah. One of the things about, I think it's 85 decibels over an hour is actually damaging to your earbuds or your ear holes. So one of the things about noise over time is one of the issues. So even 60 decibels over several hours can be damaging. And so what ends up kind of happening is, of course, you want to block anything that's really over 85 decibels. So once you get into like 100 or something, then you really do need ear protection that is buffering your ear from the sound coming in. And that's different than noise cancellation. So that's noise isolation. So when you wear something like earmuffs, whenever you go, let's say you're shooting on the range or you're mowing the lawn and your lawnmower is at like 100 decibels, you want something that's actually blocking those sound waves from ever getting to your ear. What noise cancellation does is it plays an alternate frequency, and you can tell me if this is correct, but it basically cancels the noise out by playing a frequency that coincides with, so there's a low hum of traffic or something. It figures out what that frequency is and then blocks it out using cancellation technology, which is just another sound being pumped into your ear that is actually blocking that current sound that's coming from outside.
Yeah, so just to recap those definitions real quick, there are two terms that you need to be aware of, at least two terms, but when you're shopping for these type of headphones. You have noise isolation, which is how well do the earphones, headphones, or ear protection protect you from the outside environment, from all of the sound. And so let's say, for example, if you're a bouncer at a music concert or music venue, you're going to want to have some noise isolation if you're the dude standing right next to the speakers, right? So you want to make sure to block out, you want to make sure to isolate your ears from the outside environment. Yeah. The other term there is noise cancellation, which, as Ryder was talking about, there are actually a couple of different types of noise cancellation. I think there's both passive and active. And what you're referring to is active noise cancellation. And so what that does is it uses microphones, usually on the device itself. Sometimes I think it could use other devices as well. But so let's say, for example, with my AirPod Pro, they have microphone on them, and they listen to the world around you. And then, I wish I had my iPad connected so I could draw.
Could show how the waves.
Yeah, so you have a wave, and it does the squiggly, and then basically you take that same wave and you shift it by a little bit, and it exactly cancels out that sound. So that's what the active noise cancellation does. So those are the two main terms that you want to keep in mind as you're looking, is noise isolation and noise cancellation.
And noise isolation has a rating scale that's something like NRR or something like that. I'm probably going to mess it up because I can't remember exactly. But when you're on like a work site, you want a noise isolation of something like 27, 26, something like this. And this is what we're really talking about here is when people go to sleep at night and they don't want to hear sound, they can put these little foam things in their ears and it blocks sound out. You can also just wear an earmuff whenever you're working, and it doesn't have to play audio or anything else. You're just blocking the sound from ever getting to your ear. And something like that is a cheap solution. But what we're finding more frequently is that, for instance, if you want to sit on your lawnmower and it's running at 100, or you're pushing your lawnmower and it's running at 100 decibels, you not only want to block sound from getting to your ear, but you probably also want to play your tunes and have them sound pretty good. But the other thing you don't want to do is get that sound volume cranked up over, say, about 60 to 70 decibels. Because over time your ears are adaptive, so they adapt to things. So it's why you can go to a concert and it's painfully loud at first, and then after a while you start adapting. And it's the exact same if you go or listen to somebody and they're talking very softly. Over time your ears will adapt and you'll be able to pick up on that sound. So you can start with the volume down instead of starting with it all the way up. When you do these things, the problem is you're trying to block out your lawnmower sound to hear something, so you keep cranking the volume up, which means you're then damaging your ears just as much as your lawnmower is.
Right, and actually maybe even more, right? So in this case, I want to point out that I know from talking with our viewer here that he was using the regular AirPods, not the AirPod Pro. So they had no noise isolation or noise cancellation. And so that means that the sound from his earbuds, a lot of it's actually kind of getting lost because it's not a perfect seal either. And since there's no noise cancellation, he's got to crank it up, like you said. So he's blasting his iPhone music or whatever podcast, probably, the morning show. He's probably what he's watching at full blast.
Yeah, just going through the past episodes,
exactly.
re-listening and re-listening. And,
yeah. And he's like, man, I wish I had more grass to cut.
yeah. It says everyone mowing a lawn ever.
Exactly.
If I only had more lawn to mow.
Exactly. But so he's got
so
the loud noise.
And you pull out the shears and you start manscaping.
He's like, hey, your lawn's looking a little long. Can I hop over there? And
Hey, neighbor.
Hey, neighbor. But yeah, so he's got the loud noise from the motor, which, I mean, it's 2021, dude. Get you one of those electric motors. But anyways, that's neither here nor there.
Lawnmower.
Right. So he's got the noise from the lawnmower itself. Wait, how does a lawnmower sound? Let's hear it. I don't know what kind of lawnmower you're using, but he's got that sound, and then he also has all the loud noises from his ears. Whereas if he had something with a little more noise isolation, which I confirmed on my fancy device here, that passive noise cancellation is another way of saying noise isolation, which is just like, so if you have earbuds and they have rubber tips, like that is forming a seal, which is sealing out and isolating you a little bit. So that's passive noise cancellation, which is the same as noise isolation.
So we haven't really even gotten into the actual earbuds themselves,
right,
or the over-ear. And he's probably correct that over-ear is probably going to offer you more protection and more options. One of the over-ear systems that I use in my workshop whenever I'm dealing with loud noises, which I almost always have ear protection on, even more than I have eye protection on, which is crazy.
Probably good.
Yeah, the ear protection that I have been using for years is 3M Work Tunes.
3M Work Tunes. Okay.
And it's because it's like a $30 or $40 set of over-ear Bluetooth. There's only one button on it. So even if you're wearing gloves, or like lately my hands have been covered with plaster, I can just hit the button and it pauses, it plays, it does mostly what you need to. If you need to skip, you need to actually pull your phone out of your pocket or whatever. But I find them to be pretty handy and relatively cheap. And that's something else, is I've broken a pair of them. It took me about 2 years to break a pair, which is pretty impressive because they're dropping all the time and stuff like that. So they're very durable. Now 3M has another version that is high scale, and it like high end. It actually has noise cancellation and isolation and everything else in it. I can't remember the name of that one exactly, but it's closer to $150. And I'm sure it's great. I'm sure it's wonderful. It's probably much better I can't remember if it's called Pelotor or something like that.
Okay, so but you could look up 3M, and
3
these are headphones, not just
over ear.
not just
Yeah.
isolation, right?
Right. So it'll play music. It has Bluetooth and everything else.
And since those are made by 3M, they've got extra protection because that's the point, right? Is to provide that ear protection while also allowing you to listen to the music. So that's probably one of the best options, especially if you work in a loud environment or if you're in like a shop or something like that.
Newcomers on the scene are IsoTunes, and that's another brand that you should look into if you're interested in job site or work related stuff. So you have, I guess, a couple of categories. IsoTunes really leans into work and construction on job sites, and they even say that they're OSHA approved, which is great. They have a pretty high NRR, which is the sound dampening, the isolation.
Right.
And so some of that you find with things like earbuds is the type of tip you're using, as Reed mentioned earlier, like a foam tip. But what's funny about those foam tips is oftentimes you can just buy a set of foam tips and put them on whatever earbuds you already own. So you don't necessarily need to drop the $100 on a set of IsoTunes if all you're really getting is the foam tip. Now, IsoTunes has other technology that's great, but there's also the gun market, right? Which is it's something like active noise suppression, where within 0.02 milliseconds it detects the loud noise and then it blocks that somehow.
Oh, that's cool.
And that's for tactical shooting and shooting on the range and stuff like that. Then they actually have technology now that's based around that. So it's something else to look into if you actually shoot guns and you do stuff like that. So there's a couple of really nice options there, but I think between IsoTunes, I think Peloton and this 3M thing, and then there's a group called Walker that also does the tactical shooting stuff.
Okay.
And I've never used these shooting earbuds. I've just seen them online. Now, for daily wear, that's something completely different. When you're in your office, you may not want to wear the 3M WorkTunes, big chunky things. They're comfortable for a little while, but after a while they start pushing on your ears.
And maybe the more expensive ones would be a little bit more comfortable.
You would hope, but I don't honestly know.
Yeah.
I've got probably 4 pair of over-ear earphones.
You got a lot of ears, man.
I have so many ears. Yeah, and it's just collections over time of things. But the ones that I love for daily wear are the Sony XM whatever 4000s or whatever the heck it is. I can't remember the numbers, but the noise canceling over ear that have terrific audio sound. And here's the funny thing about that is they mess with the sound a little bit. It's not pure sound. So if you're an audiophile, these won't be for you. But for most people, it sort of kicks up the bass a little. It has things called sound staging that are really great. I mean, almost everyone, when they review these, they talk about sound staging. So you can kind of go through some of those. And then for my computer, I actually have Audio Technica. And whenever I'm doing video editing or podcast editing, I wear these, and these plug into my computer, and they have a terrific sound. They're roughly $150 to $170. The Sony ones that I was just mentioning, I think they're like $300 now. I got them for much cheaper than that whenever I bought them, but I didn't even want to buy a Sony. I was looking at all these other exciting brands that I thought were going to somehow be better. I was looking, of course, at Bose. I was looking at Shure, and somewhere along the way I just went, you know what, everyone recommends these Sonys, I'm just gonna do it. And I have been super happy about it.
Cool. So there's just a couple of the notes we had in case there's
I actually wrote stuff down on this.
Yeah, and anything on there that you didn't cover?
No, I think I just ran through a whole bunch of it. There's also Beats are really popular, but I almost never see them doing well in any of the reviews. So I don't know whether they're not giving the reviewers enough money or if they're really just not that great. They seem to be super bass heavy. The over ear doesn't actually seem to go over your ear. It seems like a little bitty ring that just smashes against your ear, which has to mean that they're uncomfortable over time.
Yeah, it's worth noting that there are, and I'm not going to get the terminology right. There actually may be different terms for it, but when you're looking at what some people call cans, which is they're the headphones that actually go over your ears. There are some that actually kind of leave a gap for your ear, and they like kind of think of a bowl. Like you take a bowl and you put it over your ear. There's some that are like that, and there's some that are more just flat and they just kind of sit on top. So that's one thing to consider. I would imagine the ones that are more like a bowl would provide better noise isolation. But it's also worth pointing out that when you're using these noise isolation, active noise cancellation rather, that's oftentimes something you can turn on and off as you see fit, because there are times maybe where you want it, and there's times maybe where you don't.
The technology's better on that too. They now have it where you can set it up to where when you speak on these Sonys, for instance, that I have, when you speak, it detects it and
That's
it
cool.
automatically kills or pauses whatever is going on, so you can hold a conversation while still using them. Because it has microphones that are picking up outside sounds as well, and it also will change according to your environment,
That's
whatever
awesome.
the active
That's the Sony.
cancellation is. Yeah, and some of this is when you're walking along a street, you want to hear a car that's coming up on you. You actually don't want that canceled
Right.
out because that's dangerous. And this is the problem that you run into on things like job sites. Is you don't want to just block all sound. What if somebody's yelling at you, "Hey Jimmy, there's a pipe falling towards your head"? I mean, you definitely want to hear that.
That's also a really long sentence for someone to exclaim in an emergency. Hey, Jimmy, watch out. The 2x4 that's only 17 inches long is falling. It's pine. It's not oak, but it's coming. It's coming. It's careful. Watch out.
You never know. I
Yeah.
mean, somebody might be really verbally loquacious on these websites. Loquacious.
Oh, that's another word you
good
like.
one. Oh, yeah.
So to wrap up a couple of these things, so we talked about there's noise isolation, which is how much you are isolating your ears from the outside environment, which is also known as passive noise cancellation. Then there's active noise cancellation, which is usually using microphones to detect sounds from the environment, and then it cancels that out so you don't hear it in your ears. And so by the combination of those two things, it not only does it protect your ears, but allows you to listen to the things that you want at a lower volume and hear them better as well. And so the question we're answering here had to do with noise protection, especially for him, specifically while he was mowing the lawn. And so I want to point out a couple of other things. So Ryder talked about some of the main brands and types that were good for if you want a lot of isolation. For example, if you're working in a shop or some sort of loud environment, or maybe you work at a concert venue or something like that, or a construction site where there's lots of loud noises. Loud noises! I had to say it again. And then we talked about some that you would maybe use more every day. And so I also want to bring up two of the probably more popular earbuds that people are buying these days are AirPods and AirPod Pros, and then also Raycons. So those are kind of some of the popular Bluetooth wireless earbuds that people are buying. And I believe Raycon does noise cancellation as well. I'm not 100% sure. I think they have different levels as well. But I'll talk about the AirPods because those are the ones that I have. They have different modes you can have. So you can put on noise cancellation or whatever, but then you can also turn on what's called transparency mode, which sounds similar to what you're talking about with the Sony, just it's not automatic, which is where you could have both earbuds in, but you can still hear the world around you while you're also listening to your music or whatnot. So that way, if you're walking up to the coffee shop and you want to order, like you can talk with the barista and stuff like that without having to take your headphones out. But one thing, the last thing we'll say on this and we'll move on is a really cool feature, at least on iOS, and I don't know if there's something similar with Android or not, is you can actually monitor your headphone levels and your sound exposure, so you can set it up to where your phone will warn you, like, hey, like you're listening too loud. And so that's called checking your headphone levels. And we'll share a link on this in the chat and in the description. But what it is you go to your settings, and then you go to your control center, and then you add hearing. And then you connect your headphones and you start playing your audio or whatever. And then you open your control center, which you do by swiping from the top right corner of your screen. And then you'll look for the little ear icon. And then it'll show the audio level in decibels that your headphone is displayed. So it'll say, oh, this is at this level. And it actually color codes. So it's green if it's not too loud. And then it gets yellow if it's kind of getting towards that too loud spot. And then red if it's like, hey, it's getting too bad. And then also using the health feature, you can actually browse your headphone audio over time. And so you can look and see, how your headphone levels have been. And this is done using the the phone or the iPad or the computer itself. So that's independent of what type of headphones you use. So that might be something that you guys might want to set up, especially if you're someone who always has headphones in or always has.
Yeah, most people do have hearing damage, and some of that might be concerts, but a lot of it is that we're always plugged in now.
Yeah, because you're sitting there and you're on your computer, or you're on the couch, and you're like trying to ignore your wife, and so you just have your things in. It's like, oh my gosh, all I hear is her blabbering mouth all the time.
Noise
so
canceled.
Crank
Noise
it up,
cancel.
crank it up. Yeah. And so it also, maybe this holiday season, this Black Friday, whatever, it might be a good time for you to consider buying noise cancellation headphones or noise isolation headphones. And we're gonna provide links for the ones that Ryder mentioned in our description and show notes, so that way you guys can know exactly the ones that we were talking about. We had some of the model numbers kind of roughly guessed.
And there's
but
a great video that we'll link to as well by the Wood Whisperer, who is somebody who, of course, works in a shop. And
that kind of wood whispering.
That wood whispering,
Yeah.
yes. And he walks through things like ISO tunes and like the $20 things all the way to the $150 earbuds, and which ones actually block sound best when you're in the shop. And I actually ordered a pair of ISO tunes and just returned them this week.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I just didn't find them to be. I mean, they were difficult to put on. They didn't feel good in my ears. The audio wasn't very good, and they're kind of clunky. And I just went for $109. No,
Nah,
like
yeah.
So I'm actually looking again because I thought I had done all the research.
Yeah.
And it didn't pay off.
Well, this makes me think of a couple of things that we'll discuss here shortly in our next segment, where we talk about our purchasing decision, which is, when is it worth spending a little bit more, and also how much research should you do before you stop. But before we get there, we're going to take a quick break so we can refresh our coffee. Normally we'd have music, but naturally I'm having issues with the computer and tech per usual. So we will take a quick break, and we will be right back. Welcome back. We've
we
got our
still in
coffee in
preview
hand.
mode?
No?
I see the little yellow sign that says preview mode.
Well, that's because it's there, but we're live, so don't
we?
you worry. We're live.
I hope so.
Cheers.
I'm alive.
Welcome back.
Coffee helps.
Coffee helps. So we are back now. We just finished talking a little bit about buying noise canceling, noise isolating not iPhones, headphones. So one, we had a listener write in. So that was the first of hopefully many Gar segments, which is
Go ask, writer, and read.
Go ask, writer, and read. So in the comments below or through our contact us on our website, helpfulforlife.com, please write in and let us know. And eventually we'll have a special page just for this. But until then, just get through us through the comments.
Sorry, I went really into that. If that was too much information, also let us know. If you just want the Cliff Notes version, I can stop talking at any point.
Yes, and there are many people who ask themselves every day, when will writers stop talking? So that's our next segment. Yeah,
make an acronym out of that.
Exactly. So now we're going to be talking about the purchasing process and the purchasing decision process. And Ryder and I are going to talk a little bit about how we do it and some of the things that we see and some of the traps we find ourselves falling into. So I guess we'll just go ahead and jump right into that. So when it comes to the purchasing decision, the first thing to know is, what the heck are you buying?
Yeah. What are you buying?
Yeah, exactly. And, so we're going to give some kind of general tips, but we'll also maybe talk about these headphones to tie it in to what it would be like when you're looking at a real product, right? So the first thing to know is what you're buying and who are you buying it for? And then the next important thing is, how are they going to use it? And
even before that, there's this thing that happened to me that I think happened with these ISO tunes, where I kept browsing Instagram or whatever, Safari, Amazon, and I kept getting these advertisements, and everything that I looked at made ISO tunes seem like the thing that I needed to have.
Yes.
So this is before I even made the decision to purchase. I kept getting bombarded, and if you get hit 32 times with the same message, one of those times you're going to click on the link, and then after that you're going to see this thing 5 times more often, and it builds what you would consider some sort of reputational credibility because of recognizability. You actually see and recognize this product, and then all of a sudden you want it and you think it's great, whether or not you know anything about it. So this also becomes this thing that I think Alexandra would say we need to probably question.
Right, for sure. And that is, the more popular the thing, the more you should question, like, hey, are these things actually good, or are they just popular and marketed well? And that's where Beats fall into that for sure. And also the AirPods and the other one I said, the Raycons, yeah. Those are things that have been heavily marketed. So it's worth making sure, like, hey, are these things worth it? Or did all these people just have them because they got paid to advertise them?
And is it really worth $259? I know they have reputational quality of some level, but you can get $20 earbuds that are pretty good these days.
Yeah.
So is it worth that extra $230, $240?
Which brings me to one of the most important questions in my mind, which is, how often is someone going to be using this thing, right? Whether you're buying this for you or for somebody else. And, I'll tell kind of my rationale for when I spend a little more versus spend a little less, and I'd be curious to hear what you say. But for me, the more often I'm using something, the more I can justify a higher cost. My earbuds are something that I use every day for hours and hours and hours a day. Literally, they're always in my pocket. So I was comfortable spending a little bit more on something like that because I'm using it literally all the time. And I think earbuds would be a great thing to splurge on, especially if you're someone who's using them all the time, or if you're in that type of environment where you need that noise isolation, that noise cancellation, or so you travel a lot and you want to block out all the noise of the plane or something like that. When you're doing these use cases that justify the features, it makes it worth spending a little bit more.
Yeah, it's one of the ways that I justify something like having a fancy iPhone is if I was to spend $1 a day on something that I use as often as I use my iPhone, it's well worth it. If somebody said to me, you know what, this phone is going to cost you $2 a day, I would still buy it. I would still use it, right? So sometimes I think about it in terms of that. Like, how many wears are you going to get out of a shirt? If you're going to wear it 50 times, is it worth $50? I don't know. These are questions you can ask. You can start putting like long-term value on something based off how frequently you think you're going to use it. And then there's other occasions where that really breaks down and it doesn't make sense.
Right.
So, for instance, getting a really nice suit that you know you're only going to wear maybe once a year, sometimes once every 2 years. Is that worth the, say, $600?
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. And, a really nice suit for $600 would be quite the steal, to be honest.
It would be. It would be. And I'm thinking of there's certain kind of, this would still be, what do you call that, where it's middle of the road, but it feels kind of high end, but you better not use it too hard. It's like the Harbor Freight tools.
Yeah.
It can feel good and it can get the job done, but maybe you shouldn't put too much stress on it.
Yeah. But some of the other things that come into play are, first off, I want to point out, when it comes to money and buying things and psychology, like we can get into a whole topic just on that, but you can justify a purchase many different ways. And that can be good, but it can also be bad because it could lead you to making purchases that maybe you shouldn't, right? But for example, one of the most common ways this is done is through financing and through monthly payments. And if you look, for example, at car commercials, the number that they push more and more is that monthly payment number.
Yeah.
It's not, hey, this is $50,000 car.
Right,
it's,
right.
oh, you could pay $300 a month or $400 a month. Or
1 year finance APR, blah, 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 there's something free, and they have all these codes, and they make it seem quite doable. And it is quite doable. But the problem is when everyone is doing this to you, and then all of a sudden you look at your monthly bill and like you've got, say, $2,000 worth of small ticky-tacky charges coming in every month on this. It's a subscription model that's also a finance model.
Right. And one thing I want to point out, so that's a big factor for me, is I always look at the total cost. How much is this thing going to cost me for the entire lifetime of it, right? Mm-hmm. And that includes things like financing, but that also may include other factors. Like, for example, maybe there's maintenance that needs to be happening. Maybe there's accessories that need to be bought, things like that. So, for example, one of the things I've complained a lot about the last few days has been my MacBook. And if I want to buy a MacBook now, they have so few ports that you have to buy additional accessories and dongles to make them be able to function to the way that you want. And everyone has different needs and uses, but for me, that was a big factor. It's like, okay, well, this laptop, maybe it costs $1,500. I'm just using rough numbers here, right? $1,500, but then I have to buy a dock. That's another $100 or $200. And I have to buy the keyboard, the monitor, all those extra things.
Because they keep making it lighter and thinner, it's also more fragile. So then you have to buy a protective case for it or something like. And this is the same with your cell phones. They used to build phones you could drop off of a building and they would still work. And yet today you can't drop your phone 3 feet without it breaking. So then we have to buy prophylactic covers for everything.
Yeah, so it's about considering the total cost. And just to use an example with the car, anytime you have something that's financed. So if I'm looking at a car, I want to know, I care less about that monthly payment. I care more about, hey, is that $40,000 over the life, or is that $50,000? And also, if I'm financing something, I want to know how much extra am I paying just to finance that thing, right. And it's totally worth that money if it makes sense, right? So it's like, okay, well, I can't pay $40K up front, right? But I can pay $400 a month. But I recognize that's going to end up costing me a few grand extra, but that's just the cost of doing business. And so that's okay. But if they're trying to move me into this other thing and it's like, oh, it's only from $400 to $500 a month. Well, guess what? That adds up to thousands and thousands of dollars extra that you're paying. Yeah. So that's important to look at that overall cost, the accessory costs, and the cost over the life of the thing.
Yeah. And you know, one of the things about delayed gratification on this stuff is that, I mean, I've never bought a car outright with cash, but I love the idea of being able to do it because I know how much money I would save long term. And that's the funny thing as well. We're not good with statistics, as Alexandra said. Like, we are awful at it. And so the problem is we often desire something or feel that we need something before we do. And a lot of this is marketing. A lot of this is comfort. A lot of this is also like how we relate to the world. We relate to the world by our autonomy and our movement through it, and also social signaling. So having those really nice earbuds, that's a social signal. Having a really nice Mac computer, you're signaling something, but it's also a tool that works for you. And if you really need that tool, and that tool is going to be the thing that gets the job done and makes your life easier, you just have to weigh the pros and cons on it. How much do you really need this, or could you get away with a cheaper option until you save up enough money to just buy something for its outright cost?
Yes, that's a very good point. And this is bringing up one other thing that I wanted to talk about, which is as we're moving into this big purchasing season, right? It may actually be kind of counterintuitive, but now actually might be a great time for you to get a new credit card. Oh, what? Oh,
I
hey.
saw you look at the camera, but
Yes,
you were
I'm
like,
looking
I
at
was like,
looking at the camera. But yes, now might be a good time for you to get a new credit card. And I want to say this very carefully, right? I do not think you should get a credit card if you are worried about buying things that you cannot afford or that you should not be buying. Or you do not want to use that as an excuse to then fall further and further into debt or fall into debt. So if you're someone who is worried about having that self-control or whatnot, then be very careful about getting a credit card, much less a new credit card. But if you're someone who has pretty good self-control and you are on top of your money and you're basically are willing to pay off your card every
right.
month or
But
whatever.
also, every line of credit you open can, at certain points, be a negative on your overall credit score. So pay attention to those kind of things too. If you have too many lines of credit open, that's a negative. So you'll take hits on that.
Yeah, and if as we're talking about this stuff, you're like, well, why, and what's the point, and how do I know more, and things like that. Well, we actually have a credit card guide for you guys. It's called Swipe Right, the credit card guide. I've posted a link in the chat. We'll put one in the description as well. Or you could go to helpfulforlife.com/resources, and you'll see the guide there. But that talks through all these different types of questions of when you should get one, when you shouldn't, and one of the reasons why now is a good time to get a new credit card is because if you know the holidays is a big spending time for you, and you're going to spend that money anyways, well, if you spend that, say, $500, $1,000, $3,000, whatever that number is, over the first 3 months of your card, a lot of times you can get what's called a sign-up bonus, which is essentially free money back to you. And that could be in the form of credit card points or airline points, or sometimes just straight up cash back. So right before the holidays is actually a pretty good time to get a new credit card because you know you're probably about to do some spending, so you'll hit what's called the minimum spend requirement in order to get that bonus back. And so who knows? Maybe if you're spending $500 on gifts and you get a $500 bonus, you got your Christmas for free that
and
year.
there are people who do this almost as a lifestyle, this credit card churn. These are people who are really good. They basically have calendars set on when to buy a card, when to cancel a card, and they can cycle through getting all these bonuses from different companies and different cards. And there's a real there's a skill and a talent to it, just like finding cheap airplane flights. Like if you're really on top of it, there are ways to do this. You just have to, this is once again the purchasing cycle. How much research are you willing to do? What kind of person are you? Are you the kind of person who can like get a credit card, use it for its benefits, and then realize that you need to cancel a previous one because you don't need so many lines of credit open? And then, are you the kind of person who will do all this, or will you just let all these things sit there, which will become a liability over time rather than actually being beneficial? Because we're talking short-term benefits versus long-term benefits. And so this is also part of the purchasing journey.
Yeah, and when you talk about credit cards and credit card rewards, which is some of the things we're talking about here, you can look and see different cards give larger percentages back for different things. And so if you want to be, again, it takes a little bit of extra maybe time and effort and forethought, but once you kind of set up the systems, it's much easier. But maybe it's like, oh, I know this card gets a higher percentage back for gas, this card gets a higher percentage back for groceries, and this card gets a higher percentage back for travel. So you use those cards for those specific things. And oh, by the way, in case you weren't aware, certain cards actually have marketplaces where you can go and shop through their marketplace to do the shopping that you would do anyways, and then you actually get a higher percentage back. So for example, right now, if you're considering buying Apple stuff, I know there's a credit card that I happen to have called the Chase Sapphire Reserve card, where you get 1.5 times as many points when you're buying Apple products right now. And that you need to do that. Sometimes you got to just make sure you use the card. Other times you got to go through their specific marketplace. And basically, when you go through a marketplace, you go through the credit card site, and then it takes you to a thing, and then you click a special link. Say, oh, I'm going to go shop at Best Buy through this link, and then I will get whatever that bonus may be. So that's another way to, you're already using the thing, and you're already buying the thing anyway, so you're just getting a larger percentage back. And one other tool that can help you with that, getting more money back, there's a tool called Honey. And I have not used it myself that much, but basically what it is, it's called a browser extension. So you install it into your browser on your computer. So it may be Safari or Chrome or Opera or Firefox. And then anytime you're going to check out somewhere, you can check that extension, whether it be at Amazon or you're buying some new shoes or you're buying some pizza. And it'll go and it'll check all the coupon codes that are out there. And it'll say, hey, here's a coupon code that's going to give you some money back. And it's a completely free thing to do. And so that's another way where it's like, hey, I can save a little bit of money while I'm already, doing this. And one maybe downside is, hey, that thing is free. How do they make money, right?
Right.
And it's like, well, maybe they might be using some of your stuff anonymously, taking that data and then selling that data elsewhere. That's one way they may be making money. But it's also possible they may be making money from the company, right? So Pizza Hut pays them a percentage of the purchase for thanking them for helping you make that purchase, right?
Yeah. There's no telling how that's working. It makes me wary, but there's also things when you're going through your purchasing journey, such as checking on the reviews, the quality of the reviews. So there's basically review checkers, and when you're on Amazon, you can actually get a score. Like, this is only 64% valid reviews. The rest of them are either artificial or doubtful. And so what ends up happening there is you can actually, going on things like Amazon or some other marketplace, you can actually kind of gauge which products are actually just fluff and hype by the number of false reviews that they have.
Yeah, because what some of these companies will do is, I'm selling my product on Amazon. I will either hire a bunch of people, or maybe I will use bots. I'll use computers to basically create these fake reviews. So that way, when you, the customer, sees, oh, this has 5,000 4-star or 5-star reviews,
right.
You're like, oh, that's a good thing. But then you recognize that this is a bad score. And I believe that one of them is called Fake Spot. Yeah, so fakespot.com is one area you can use to basically, you paste in the link of what you're looking at, and then it will check to see the quality of those reviews and give you a score. And there may be other ones of those as well, but that one popped into my head. So talking about the purchasing decision, so we've talked about considering the total cost, which means just for not only for the thing itself, but any accessories it may need, any maybe maintenance it needs over time. Maybe that's batteries and things like that. Maybe there's repairs that need to be made on it. We talked about what financing does and the cost, the total cost versus that monthly cost. And then we talked a little bit about how can you justify the expense. And, for me in general, the more I'm going to use a thing, the higher dollar amount I'm willing to spend, because I recognize that dollar per use is actually better for you, right? Because you're using it more. And a couple of other things that we mentioned.
Oh, we kind of circled around on some of that. But yeah, I think short term, long term was a big deal. There's also social signaling, which is hard. We're also getting manipulated all the time by marketing. So that's something to be aware of. If you ever feel comfortable about a product or feel like this is for sure the one you need, you've probably been marketed to. And so you really do need to look around. So Reed and I will probably look at a lot of reviews. And what's funny about those reviews is even those can be biased.
Right.
But that's why you can go down this kind of rabbit hole, especially when you get into technology. What's best, what's not best. But at the end of the day, if you're going to be buying a $100 item and you spend 30 hours researching it, you might just be enjoying the research.
Right. And so that's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up, because the thing I like to do is I like to do just enough research to where I kind of know the differences between things, and I can kind of feel out, all right, I think this is the one. But then what I actually have started doing a lot more, especially within the last year, is I'll buy multiple, because at the end of the day, you really don't know until you have the thing in your hands and you're using it. Like, okay, this one's way cheaper than that one, but how does it feel in my hands? Like, you can tell when something's really cheap. You can feel like, oh, this is pretty cheap, and this is probably going to break before too long, which is one of the things I think we alluded to. But longevity of the product, right? If a thing is going to last much longer, that means it's more valuable to use. So, for example, when I was buying a computer, I know that Macs actually are very good at lasting for a long time. They without running into issues and falling apart, and also they hold resale value really well. So that's important to think about, especially for the higher ticket dollar items. So, for example, 5 years from now, I know I can sell my Mac, and I can still get a pretty good chunk of money for that if I sell it on Craigslist or whatever. Yeah. So that's another factor to keep in mind. But yeah, so you're doing the research, which, by the way, one of my favorite things to do is I'll do a quick Google search on the thing, and I'll look up, best things, and that'll give me a list of whatever 10 things with some probably crappy reviews on them. But then I'll go and I'll look a little deeper into each one of those things. And another big spot I really like looking at is YouTube, because then people will have the product, they'll take it out, they'll compare it, and when it comes to headphones or video or things like that, a lot of times they'll do little side by sides, like, oh, here's what they sound like, here's the pros and cons, and a lot of times they'll have the table that compares them. But yeah, as Ryder was alluding to, don't spend too much time. So don't be afraid to buy multiple and just be like, all right, do a little bit of research. These are the ones I think I want. Buy them, and then you can try them out and then return them. And it's worth letting you know, even if you're buying from Amazon, Amazon has a pretty good return policy. And you can actually just go drop off the item at a UPS store or a Kohl's department store if you have those near you. And it's actually relatively easy. You just go in and drop the thing off. And so instead of spending the extra 10 hours, for example, when I'm buying my mic stand, for example, I just buy both mic stands, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I thought this one was going to be a little weird or a little creaky, but when I got it, it wasn't bad. And so now I kept it, and then I returned the more expensive one.
Yeah, and there's just little things you can do like that. And this just reminds me of, I think Tim Ferriss, when he started out, was early on before Amazon and all this stuff. He would buy multiples of things, lots of different things, and keep track of how they handled the whole process of delivery and receiving and problems and returns. And so you can become kind of a bizarre expert on which companies operate the best ways by sort of intentionally going through this process of sort of becoming a professional consumer. Let's say, like, you can buy things and figure out how to return them, do reviews on them. A lot of people make a living just doing things like reviews,
right?
Which is crazy to think about, that is your entire job, is just to purchase things, talk about them online, and then return them.
But it's a great thing to point out, because I know some of our listeners are probably like, dang, this sounds like a lot of work. I don't want to do this. And I probably don't even know enough to be able to see through the marketing, to understand all the technical terms, and do all that kind of stuff. Well, that comes to one of the most important parts of the research and buying process, which is ask for help. In my opinion, not all of us should be going to do that research, right? So leverage the people who are good at this type of thing. So say, for example, you're looking at a tech thing, and maybe you have a friend or a family member or someone who is kind of techie. Well, ask them, like, hey, I'm going to buy this thing. Do you have any tips, or do you know somewhere or some site where it's a good trusted source for me to get good reviews? And so, not to discriminate against age, but especially if you're an older person, you're not down with it, you're not hip with the technologies. Yeah, don't be afraid to ask somebody else, like, hey, Sonny boy, tell me about them computer things.
Yeah, and then this is the other thing. Sometimes kids don't know.
Yes.
Right? They're like, Beats are the best, yo. And you're just like, no, they're not.
Right.
So you can be persnickety about it. It's actually kind of fun if you enjoy the process. If you don't enjoy the process, you're probably not going to enjoy this entire episode of our podcast.
Yes. But the last thing I'll say, and then we'll give our challenge, which is, don't be afraid to go into a good old-fashioned brick and mortar store, which is a fancy way of saying a physical store. So if you're going to buy something electronic, go to Best Buy. Talk to the people who work there. They sell these things all the time. They know, like, hey, this one's good for this thing, this one's good for that thing. And by the way, if you can tell the person doesn't know what they're talking about, you can respectfully ask, like, hey, do you mind if I get someone else's opinion on this? And it's their job to let you do that, right? So now be understanding. Don't try and do this on Black Friday when they're just completely being inundated and swamped, right?
Which is, by the way, if you're looking at tech stuff, we've got all these holidays coming up, and there's going to be a lot of sales on. So, stay tuned in. We'll give you more updates as that approaches.
Yeah, for sure. So that is, us talking about some of the things that we think about, through our purchasing process and decision. And, I'm sure we'll probably think of other things as we go along, and we will update you guys if we have some big things that come up. But Ryder, did you have anything that popped in your mind that would be a good challenge for today?
Oh, what I was thinking about with the challenge, and it comes back to this buyer's journey thing and spending too much time researching versus just purchasing the thing, is I really like this idea. Maybe the challenge is, next time you're waffling between two things and you spend more than 30 minutes thinking about it, just buy them both and return one of them. I think that would be an excellent sort of challenge. I don't know if you want to do it today necessarily, but if you have something like that, it's something that I was always timid to do because I felt like I was somehow taking advantage of the system if I was doing something like that. But after returning these ISO tunes, after spending so much time researching them and feeling that the market was manipulating me and I was getting manipulated, then I bought them anyway, and then I got them and felt buyer's remorse instantly. And after trying them out for an hour, I was like, nope, this will not work for me. And turned around, put them back in the package, and sent them back, and I feel 10 times better. So now I'm back on this buyer's journey again for a different kind of noise protection earbud. So I'm kind of excited for that, but also don't feel timid about that process. So maybe the challenge is buy 2 of something, return 1 of them, or don't feel bad about buying 1 and returning it. It might cost you $5 or $6 to send it back through the post office, but that's not bad.
And to be honest, with a lot of the retailers these days, it doesn't cost you anything.
Yeah, Amazon usually doesn't cost anything.
Right, but it's worth it because one thing that people easily forget is that they're spending time, and their time is worth money, right? And obviously there is a spectrum as to, do I have more time? Do I have more money? But if there's ever a time to buy multiple of a thing and then return it, the holidays is a great time because it comes with an extended return period, right? So maybe you're like, oh, I'm buying a gift, right? Or I can't buy 2 of them and be like, here you go, Johnny. But actually you could like, oh, here's this one type of headphone, and that's the one you decide to wrap up. And then you say, well, little Johnny, like here's the one I got, but I also have this other one, so you can decide which one you like better. I did a little bit of research, but before I got too far into it, I recognized like these 2 are probably the ones you're going to want. But until you get it and you know how you're going to use it and what features really matter to you, so this is also really important if you're buying for somebody else. You can do all the research in the world, but if you don't truly know how they're going to do it, especially if it's a surprise, then it might be worth having a couple. Like, here are the options, right? Yeah. So that's the challenge for today is next time you're making a purchasing decision, don't be afraid to buy multiple, to try them out and then return the one that doesn't work for you. Because at the end of the day, you can research for hours and hours and hours, but you're never going to know until you have the thing in your hand. And oh, by the way, the longer you research something, the higher that buyer's remorse is going to be when you get the thing and it doesn't work how you want it. So there's something to be said about that too, is research enough to feel decently good about it. And then when you get it and it has some flaws, like, maybe you'll be okay living with them. And if not, you can return the thing and buy another one, right?
Yeah. I think that's another part of it is, so much of this is feelings because there's so many options out there today.
Yeah, which reminds me of a song, Feelings, Feelings, Feelings. I think it's by Bo Burnham, but we'll have to find that one out after the show. So with that being said, happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday.
And enjoy the rest of your days. Today. And
the rest of them too. Not all today.
Yes.
You can enjoy them as they approach.
All right. Y'all have a wonderful day.